"This is ridiculous," muttered the defendant's lawyer loud enough for everyone to hear. "A woman in Delta Force? What's next? Fairy tales?" Several men in the gallery chuckled. Sarah Mitchell sat perfectly still, hands folded, until the courtroom's side door opened. 12 men in tactical gear entered silently, took positions along the wall, and every single one snapped to attention, saluting the woman they'd followed into hell and back. Welcome to Hidden Heroes. Before we begin this powerful story of respect earned in silence and revealed in truth, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe that courage has no gender, hit that subscribe button and help us honor the warriors who served in shadows. The federal courthouse in downtown Denver buzzed with the typical energy of a high-profile criminal trial. Sarah Mitchell, 45, sat in the witness chair wearing a simple navy blazer and white blouse, her auburn hair pulled back in a professional bun. To most observers, she looked like any other government witness, perhaps an analyst or administrative officer called to testify about paperwork and procedures. What they couldn't see was the small scar along her jawline from shrapnel in Kandahar, or the slight tension in her shoulders that came from years of carrying 60 pounds of gear through hostile territory. They couldn't know that the woman sitting calmly under cross-examination had once spent 72 hours behind enemy lines, calling in airstrikes while Taliban forces searched for her hiding spot in a bombed-out building. Defense attorney Marcus Webb paced in front of the witness stand like a predator circling prey. At 58, he was known for his theatrical courtroom style and his ability to discredit government witnesses. He'd built his reputation on making federal agents look incompetent, and he wasn't about to let this unremarkable-looking woman undermine his client's case. "Miss Mitchell," Webb began, his voice carrying the condescending tone he reserved for witnesses he planned to destroy. "You've testified that you served in the United States military from 1998 to 2018. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, her voice steady and clear. "And you claim to have served in what you call special operations. Could you be more specific about that?" Sarah's eyes met his without flinching. "I served with the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, also known as Delta Force, from 2003 to 2015. A ripple of whispers ran through the courtroom. Webb smiled, sensing blood in the water. "Miss Mitchell, are you familiar with the history of women in combat roles in the U.S. military?" "Yes, sir, I am." "Then you're aware that women were officially barred from direct combat positions during most of the period you claim to have served in Delta Force?" "Officially, yes, sir." Webb turned to face the jury, his expression theatrical. "Ladies and gentlemen, this witness is asking you to believe that she was secretly serving in one of the military's most elite units, despite official policies that prohibited women from such roles." Prosecutor Janet Rodriguez rose from her chair. "Objection, Your Honor." Counsel is making arguments rather than asking questions. Judge Patricia Hawkins nodded. "Sustained. Mr. Webb, please stick to questions." Webb adjusted his tie and turned back to Sarah. "Miss Mitchell, can you provide any documentation of this alleged service in Delta Force?" "The specifics of my service record are classified, sir." "How convenient." Webb's sarcasm was thick. "No documentation, no proof, just your word that you were some kind of secret warrior woman." "I understand your skepticism, sir." "Do you?" Webb moved closer to the witness stand. "Because it seems to me that you're asking this jury to believe in what amounts to a fairy tale. A woman single-handedly taking on terrorists in Afghanistan?" "I never said I worked alone, sir." "Oh, so there were others? Other imaginary soldiers in this fantasy unit of yours?" Sarah remained calm, though something flickered in her eyes. "They weren't imaginary, sir." Webb sensed he was gaining ground. The jury was listening intently, several members looking skeptical. This was exactly the kind of government witness he loved to demolish. Someone making extraordinary claims with no way to prove them. "Miss Mitchell, let's talk specifics. You claim to have participated in counterterrorism operations. Can you name any of these operations?" "Operation names are classified, sir." "Of course they are. And I suppose your commanding officers are classified too?" "Some information about command structure is classified, yes, sir." Webb turned to the gallery with exaggerated frustration. "Your Honor, this witness is hiding behind classification to avoid answering basic questions about her alleged military service." Judge Hawkins leaned forward. "Miss Mitchell, while I understand the need to protect classified information, this court needs some verification of your credentials to assess your credibility as a witness. Sarah looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, my service record has been verified by the appropriate authorities. The prosecution has the necessary clearances to confirm my background. That's not enough, Webb interrupted. We're supposed to take the government's word that this woman is who she claims to be? For all we know, she's an administrative clerk who's watched too many action movies. Several men in the gallery chuckled at Webb's comment. Sarah heard the laughter but didn't react, her military training keeping her focused and composed. Mr. Webb, Judge Hawkins said, do you have specific questions for this witness, or are you simply going to continue making speeches? Webb straightened his jacket. Your Honor, I'm trying to establish that this witness lacks the credibility to testify about the serious matters in this case. She's asking us to believe she was part of some elite military unit that doesn't officially exist and operated in missions that are too secret to discuss. He turned back to Sarah, his voice dripping with mockery. Miss Mitchell, if you're such an elite operator, where's your team? Where are these phantom soldiers who served with you? Why isn't anyone here to vouch for your incredible military career? Sarah's expression remained neutral, but those who knew her well would have recognized the slight tightening around her eyes. It was the same look she'd gotten in Helmand Province when Taliban fighters made the mistake of underestimating her capabilities. My teammates have their own lives now, sir. Most have transitioned to civilian careers. How convenient. So we're supposed to just take your word for all of this? You're free to believe what you choose, sir. Webb sensed victory. The jury was clearly skeptical, the gallery was buzzing with doubt, and he was systematically destroying the government's key witness. He decided to go for the kill. Ladies and gentlemen, he addressed the jury directly, this woman expects you to believe that she was some kind of super soldier, operating in secret missions that she can't discuss, with teammates who apparently don't exist. This is ridiculous. A woman in Delta Force? What's next? Fairy tales? The chuckling in the gallery grew louder. Several jurors exchanged doubtful glances. Sarah sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, her breathing steady and controlled. Webb was about to continue his assault when he noticed something. Sarah wasn't looking defeated or embarrassed. Instead, she was looking toward the courtroom's side entrance with what might have been the faintest hint of a smile. That's when the heavy oak door opened. The first man through was Master Sergeant Jake Rodriguez, Sarah's former team leader. At 48, he still carried himself with the controlled precision of a man who had spent 2 decades in special operations. He was followed by Staff Sergeant Mike Chen, Sergeant First Class David Williams, and 9 other men, all wearing their dress uniforms with ribbons and decorations that spoke of years in the world's most dangerous places. They moved with military precision, forming a line along the courtroom's east wall. Their boots made no sound on the polished floor. Their expressions were calm, professional, and absolutely serious. The courtroom fell silent. Master Sergeant Rodriguez called out in a clear, commanding voice, "Attention!" 12 men snapped to perfect attention, their movements synchronized with the precision that comes only from years of training and combat together. Rodriguez looked directly at Sarah and spoke 2 words that carried the weight of a 12 years and countless missions. "Ma'am." "Ready." Sarah stood slowly, her civilian clothes unable to hide the military bearing that now seemed to radiate from her. For the first time in the entire trial, she smiled. "At ease, gentlemen." The 12 soldiers relaxed into parade rest, hands clasped behind their backs, eyes forward. The silence in the courtroom was profound. Judge Hawkins found her voice first. "Gentlemen, this is highly irregular. Who are you and why are you in my courtroom?" Rodriguez stepped forward 1 pace. "Your Honor, I'm Master Sergeant Jake Rodriguez, United States Army Special Operations Command. These men and I served with Captain Sarah Mitchell in the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta from 2003 to 2015. The word captain hit the courtroom like a physical blow. Webb's face had gone pale. The jury stared in stunned silence. "We heard that Captain Mitchell's service was being questioned," Rodriguez continued, his voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. "We came to set the record straight." Judge Hawkins looked from the soldiers to Sarah, then back to the soldiers. "Captain Mitchell, this witness holds the rank of captain?" "Retired captain, Your Honor," Rodriguez confirmed. "She led our unit through 47 combat operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. Every man in this room owes his life to her leadership and tactical expertise. Webb finally found his voice, though it came out as a croak. Your Honor, this is clearly some kind of setup. Mr. Webb, Rodriguez's voice cut through the lawyer's protest like a blade. With respect, sir, you don't know what you're talking about. Staff Sergeant Chen stepped forward. Captain Mitchell pulled me out of a burning Humvee in Kandahar in 2007, took shrapnel in her face doing it. Sergeant Williams added, she held our position for 18 hours in Helmand Province with a separated shoulder and a bullet fragment in her leg. Never complained once. One by one, the soldiers shared brief clinical accounts of Sarah's service. No embellishment, no drama, just facts delivered with military precision. They spoke of night raids where she led from the front, of intelligence operations where her language skills and tactical acumen had prevented American casualties, of a decoration ceremony where she had refused a Silver Star because, in her words, I was just doing my job. The courtroom listened in absolute silence. The jury sat transfixed. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, caught up in the testimonials of men who spoke about their former captain with a respect that couldn't be faked. Defense attorney Webb sat slumped in his chair, the fight completely gone out of him. His theatrical mockery seemed pathetic now, in the presence of real warriors describing real service. Judge Hawkins finally spoke. Miss Mitchell, excuse me, Captain Mitchell, I apologize for the court's treatment of your testimony. Your credentials are clearly beyond question. Sarah shook her head slightly. No apology necessary, Your Honor. Mr. Webb was doing his job, protecting his client. I understand the need for skepticism. She looked at her former teammates, men who had traveled across the country to defend her honor in a civilian courtroom where she couldn't defend herself with classified details of their shared service. Gentlemen, she said formally, thank you for coming. But this isn't necessary. I can handle civilian lawyers. Rodriguez smiled for the first time since entering the courtroom. Ma'am, with respect, we know you can handle anything. But nobody questions your service record without going through us first. The other soldiers nodded in agreement. These were men who had seen Sarah Mitchell risk her life for them countless times, who had watched her make impossible decisions under impossible pressure, who had followed her into situations where failure meant death because they trusted her judgment completely. Prosecutor Rodriguez rose from her table. Your Honor, I think we can stipulate that Captain Mitchell's credentials as an expert witness are well established. So stipulated. Judge Hawkins agreed, looking meaningfully at defense attorney Webb, who could only nod weakly. As the soldiers filed out of the courtroom with the same precision they had entered, each one stopped briefly at the witness stand. No words were exchanged, just a moment of eye contact between warriors who had shared experiences that civilians could never fully understand. Master Sergeant Rodriguez was the last to leave. He paused at the witness stand and spoke quietly, meant only for Sarah's ears. We've got your six, ma'am. Always Sarah nodded once, the gesture conveying more than words ever could. As the courtroom door closed behind her former unit, Sarah returned to the witness stand. But everything had changed. The jury looked at her with new respect. The gallery buzzed with whispered awe. Even defense attorney Webb seemed reluctant to continue his cross-examination. Judge Hawkins cleared her throat. Mr. Webb, do you have any further questions for Captain Mitchell? Webb looked at his notes, then at Sarah, then at the door through which 12 Special Operations veterans had just departed. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and respectful. No further questions, Your Honor. The trial continued, but its outcome was no longer in doubt. Sarah's testimony about the defendant's terrorist connections was delivered with the same calm precision she had once used to call in airstrikes. The jury listened to every word, hanging on the testimony of a woman they now understood was not just credible, but heroic. After the trial, as Sarah packed her briefcase in the hallway outside the courtroom, Prosecutor Rodriguez approached her. Captain, I have to ask, how did they know to come? Sarah smiled. Military networks run deep. Word travels fast when one of our own needs backup. 12 men flew across the country just to vouch for your credibility? Sarah's expression grew serious. Those men didn't come here for my credibility. They came because someone questioned their service too, indirectly. When you question whether I served with them, you question whether they served with someone worth following. She closed her briefcase and started toward the exit, then paused. Mr. Rodriguez, in Special Operations, we have a saying, leave no one behind. That doesn't end when you take off the uniform. Sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought with weapons, but with the quiet dignity of service members who refuse to let their sacrifices be forgotten. Sarah Mitchell never needed to prove herself to the men who served beside her. They already knew her worth. But in a civilian courtroom, where her service was questioned and her credibility attacked, those same warriors stood up to remind the world that respect is earned in the field, not the courtroom. And sometimes, when the world doubts what you've given for your country, the best proof isn't in documents or medals. It's in the men and women who trusted you with their lives and would do it again without hesitation. Have you ever witnessed a moment when quiet service was finally recognized? Share your story in the comments. And if this reminds you that heroism comes in many forms, subscribe to Hidden Heroes for more stories of the warriors who served in silence and the bonds that never break. This story is a work of fiction created to honor the spirit of service and the men and women who serve in classified roles. Any resemblance to actual persons or events is purely coincidental.